It began with a sealed archive buried deep beneath the Royal Library of Varynos. I wasn't supposed to find it. The Royal Library is a labyrinth of polished marble corridors, gilded staircases, and towering bookshelves that breathe the scent of dust and age. I had spent months cataloging forgotten manuscripts for an obscure historical project. Most days were uneventful, shuffling through brittle pages, noting faded ink, and brushing away centuries-old grime. But that day, a misfiled blueprint changed everything. It was a map of the library dated to an age when the Empire was still finding its shape. Faded, water-damaged, almost illegible, yet there in the lower west wing was a room with no name. No door, no archival record. Curiosity should have ended there. But for me, it was an invitation. The room's location corresponded to a narrow service corridor behind the rare manuscripts hall. It was dimly lit, choked with dust, and lined with pipes that hissed faintly as I walked. At the far end stood a panel of warped oak. Beneath its flaking varnish, I noticed the faint outline of a keyhole. The lock was brass, dull with age, engraved with a symbol I'd never seen before, a serpent coiled tightly around a crown. The craftsmanship was unlike any known to the Empire's artisans. Sharper, more deliberate, almost predatory. I flipped through my mental library of heraldry, but no such crest existed. I picked it. The vault door groaned open, releasing a stale, suffocating gust. The air smelled of rust, aged parchment, and something faintly metallic. It clung to my tongue. Blood. Inside, the chamber stretched farther than it should have. The walls were stone, unpolished and damp, weeping slow rivulets into the floor. Shelves bowed under the weight of ledgers and scrolls, their leather bindings cracked, their pages curling like dry leaves. One book stood apart from the rest. It was small, no larger than my palm, its surface pale and irregular like scar tissue. The moment I touched it, my stomach knotted. I knew the feel instantly, human skin. The clasp snapped open with an almost eager click. On the first page, written in jagged ink that seemed to pulse under the lantern light, was a single warning in a script older than any dynasty. Those who read awaken the voices. Those who listen, feed them. I should have closed it. But the pages turned as though they had weight of their own, revealing a history no scholar had ever dared to tell. This was not the celebrated golden Varynos taught in classrooms, not the empire gilded by trade and steel. This was a far older, blood-born Varynos, a kingdom erected on sacrifice. Villages vanished from its borders, not through conquest, but ritual. Whole populations disappeared in a single night, their names erased, their homes burned to ash. The ceremonies were not hidden in shame. They were recorded in meticulous detail, as though their architects expected future generations to continue the work. The ink seemed fresher than it should have been. And then, from nowhere, and yet from within, I heard it. A voice. Not an echo. Not my imagination. Something deliberate, weighted with memory. We remember, it didn't come from the room. It bloomed inside my skull, pressing against my thoughts like cold, invisible fingers. The whisper didn't fade. It deepened, curling inside my skull like smoke seeping through cracks in a coffin lid. My fingers trembled over the ledger, but my eyes refused to close it. The next page was a map, not of Varynos as I knew it, but of an empire stretching far beyond the official borders. Territories swallowed whole, coastlines altered, mountains absent. In their place, strange glyphs marked circles where rivers bled red into the sea. The ink shimmered faintly, as if wet, and when I brushed my hand over it, the scent of iron filled the air. I turned another page, and the script shifted, jagged, inhuman letters burned into the parchment rather than written. It was a record of oaths, not treaties between kings, but vows sealed in blood. The first name was one I recognized. Emperor Cashin IV, celebrated in modern history as the architect of peace. But here, he was titled the Binder of Tongues. The text described a ritual where 12 elders from conquered provinces were brought before him. Their tongues were removed, wrapped in silk, and stored in an urn beneath the throne, to silence dissent for 100 years. The empire's borders expanded without a single rebellion during his reign. The books never said why. Another entry described the harvest of the Red Moon. It spoke of an autumn when the skies turned crimson for 3 nights. The emperor's priests, wearing masks of hammered bronze, went into villages chosen by the Serpent crown. Every firstborn was taken. They were not killed, not exactly. The text said they were woven into the stone. I didn't understand until I saw the sketch. Screaming faces embedded in the walls of the capital's oldest fortifications. I read on, the words cutting into me like a slow knife. The ledger claimed that each emperor renewed the empire's power through a blood oath, a secret rite held in the Hall of the Crowned Shadow, where no record should exist. Every oath had a cost. A province emptied, a bloodline erased, a monument built from bone. The last entry in the ledger was unfinished, written in a different hand. The ink smeared, the lines jagged as if scratched in desperation. The next will break the chain. The serpent will feed on itself. I should have closed the book. I should have left the vault. But then, just beyond the edge of the candlelight, I saw movement, a figure standing perfectly still. It wore no crown, no armor, just a hood of deep crimson. Where its face should have been, there was only the shifting shape of a serpent's head, scales glinting faintly in the dark. And then, the whisper again. Louder now. You have opened the gate. The oath will take you too. The figure did not move toward me. It didn't have to. The air in the vault shifted, heavy, cold, tasting faintly of dust and ash. My candle's flame bent toward it, as if drawn by a breath. I stepped back, clutching the ledger, but the serpent's head turned with me, unblinking. For a moment, I thought I could see human eyes behind the scales, eyes so pale they seemed carved from frost. When I blinked, it was gone, but the whisper lingered. This time it wasn't just sound. It carried an image, a place I had never seen, but somehow recognized. A vast chamber lit by torches, each flame shivering inside a glass cage. At its center stood a stone table, its surface stained so dark it swallowed the light. The name formed in my mind like an answer to a question I hadn't asked. The Hall of the Crowned Shadow. My body moved before my mind agreed. I followed the memory as if it belonged to me, deeper into the archives, through narrow corridors where the air pressed against my skin. Each door I passed was unmarked, sealed with iron bands. Finally, I reached one that wasn't locked. The wood was blackened, edges warped, as though it had been burned but never destroyed. I pushed, and the hinges groaned like a dying animal. The chamber beyond was exactly as the vision had shown. Torches and glass, the stone table, the smell of centuries-old blood. But there was something else. Carved into the walls were hundreds of names, arranged in spirals. Some were scratched, deep and jagged, others delicate and precise. The spirals converged toward the center of the room, where a crown rested on a pedestal. Not a crown of gold. This one was wrought from bone, long, thin, slightly curved pieces that I realized were human finger bones, polished until they gleamed. At its base, tiny teeth had been embedded like jewels. I stepped closer, and the air around it pulsed, not like heat, but like a heartbeat. The whisper came again, but it wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a chorus. Name yourself. Take the oath. The ledger in my hand grew heavy, pulling me toward the table. Its pages began to turn on their own, stopping at a blank one. And there, without my control, my hand began to write my name. A drop of warm liquid fell onto the page. I thought it was ink, until I saw the cut forming across my palm. The blood sank into the parchment like water into dry earth. The crown shuddered. Somewhere deep below, I heard a door unlock. The sound of the unlocking door echoed up through the stone like a shiver running through the Empire's skeleton. The torches flickered violently inside their glass prisons, and with each flicker, the room changed. One blink, and I was no longer standing in a forgotten archive. I was in a hall alive with people, but not alive the way I knew life. Their skin was pale, almost translucent, their veins like rivers of black ink. They wore garments stitched with threads so fine it seemed made from spider silk, and around their necks hung pendants shaped like the bone crown before me. At the head of the hall stood a man draped in imperial red. His face was partly hidden beneath a hood, but his voice was sharp enough to cut stone. "You come to serve the shadow that crowns kings," he intoned. "Speak your name. Bind it in bone." The crowd around me shifted, their eyes hollow but burning. A young soldier stepped forward, trembling. He said his name, and instantly black ash poured from his mouth, curling into the shape of letters in the air. The hooded man reached out, plucked the ash letters as though they were tangible, and pressed them into the soldier's chest. The soldier screamed. When it ended, he stood straight, silent, eyes emptied of whatever soul had once lived there. The hooded man turned his hidden face toward me. "You have begun the oath." I tried to step back, but my body wouldn't listen. My hand, the one that had bled into the ledger, lifted of its own will. The blank page I had written on earlier was now inked with symbols, curling in tight, suffocating patterns. The hooded figure reached out, his fingers long and unnaturally jointed, and touched my chest. The world tilted. Suddenly, I was in another time. The streets of the imperial capital were burning. Men and women in armor hacked each other apart beneath the banners of the crown's shadow. From the steps of the palace, hooded figures, the same as the one in the hall, whispered words into the smoke, and wherever the words reached, people fell, clutching their throats as black veins split across their skin. Then another vision, a grand coronation. A king knelt as the bone crown was lowered onto his head. His smile was triumphant, but his eyes screamed in terror. Blood ran from beneath the crown, streaking down his face. In another, a prison deep underground. Every prisoner bore my face. Every one of them whispered in unison, "You've already taken the throne." I gasped and was back in the chamber. The crown of finger bones was no longer on its pedestal. It was in my hands. The door below was still opening. Something was coming up the steps, not hurried, but with the steady, unstoppable pace of something that had all the time in the world. And then I understood. The oath wasn't about ruling. It was about becoming part of the shadow, the thing that had ruled the empire long before there were kings to wear crowns. The footsteps grew louder, not echoing but absorbing sound. With each step, the torches dimmed, shadows swelling until they swallowed the walls entirely. I backed toward the far corner, the crown of finger bones still clutched in my hands. It pulsed faintly, as though each pale knuckle had a heartbeat of its own. My blood thudded in my ears. The stairwell mouth was now a black hole in the floor. A hand emerged, not flesh, not bone, but absence, a shape cut from the world itself. It gripped the edge of the stone, leaving frost where it touched. Then it stepped into the room. It was tall, draped in robes that trailed like smoke, and its face not a face, an ever-shifting void in which eyes appeared and vanished like stars in a restless sky. Around its throat hung hundreds of tiny bone pendants, each engraved with symbols I recognized from the ledger. One of them was my name. "The oath is sealed," it said, though its voice was not sound, but a pressure in my skull. "Now crown yourself, or I will do it for you." My hands trembled. If I refused, I knew I would vanish, swallowed whole, another whisper in the ledger. If I obeyed, I would become whatever it was. The figure stepped closer, the frost creeping across the floor toward my feet. All kings were me. All shadows served me. I don't know why I did it, whether it was terror, resignation, or something that had been moving my hand since the moment I bled into the page, but I lifted the crown. The cold of it bit into my palms. I set on my head. The instant it touched, the world shattered into black glass. My lungs filled with smoke, my vision turned inside out, and I could feel every name bound in the pendants around the figure's neck. They were mine now, voices, memories, lives, all bound to me as I was bound to the shadow. The figure leaned close, the shifting void where its face should be reflecting a single thing, my own smile. All hail the king of the Empire's shadow. When my vision cleared, I was back in the archives. But the door was locked from the inside. The ledger was closed. And somewhere in the city above, a child had just spoken my name, without ever having heard it before.